Hello and welcome back to this course on mastering top visualization techniques in Tableau. If you haven't already, please go to the course content section of the Udemy course page and download the datasets for this course. You'll notice we have individual folders for individual sections, and then a dataset, African mobile data, that covers all the sections not listed here with their own individual folder. This African mobile dataset is a fictional cell phone provider in Africa, and we've been given some data where we just have a transaction or a row ID. We have the individual dates, country, city, region, segment, sales, and profit that occurred for that provider. In this section, again, we're going to be looking at domain padding and data densification. I already have a connection set up so I can show you an example, but just to review, you'll connect to a new data source, you'll go to Excel, you'll find the African mobile data, connect there. Bring out section 2 for this video. You notice we have all the same columns, and let's jump right in. The first thing we're going to look at is called domain padding. So if I bring date and sales, change this to a bar chart, you can see that we have data for years 2013, 14, 15, and 2016. If I expand that out, you'll see we have data across all 4 quarters for all 4 years. We'll change this to entire view so it spaces nicely. Then if I expand that out one more time, you'll notice something happened. All of a sudden our quarters are different sizes because we're actually missing some data. So we have January, we have February, April, May, June, but we do not have March. And then we also are missing September in 2013, and you'll find a few other missing months throughout the data set. So what's happened right here is Tableau is drawing a mark on the view, in this case a bar, for every single piece of data that it has at the level of detail you're working with. So right now, we have data for January, so it can draw a bar for January showing the sum of sales. We have data for February, so Tableau can draw a bar. We do not have data for March. However, it is possible, and Tableau is intelligent enough to recognize that there are times we actually want to show that missing data, especially in the context of dates. So if you come up here to month, you right-click, you'll find we actually have an option that says Show Missing Values. If you click on that, we now have domain padding. Again, I mentioned in the intro, it's a simple concept that a lot of you have probably seen before. It's just a fancier name for it that honestly confused me a ton when I first started out. But what domain padding does is it does just that. It pads your data. It gives it a place on your view even though it doesn't actually exist inside of your data. So notice we have March now, we have September, we have May, we have August. All these months that we didn't have in our data before are now showing up, so we have the complete picture, January through December, for all 4 years, even though that didn't exist in our data set before. So that's the concept of domain padding as it applies to dates. It also applies to histograms. So if we bring up sales, we'll do a right-click drag on our rows. Don't do any aggregation. Actually, sorry, Control W will switch that. Do the entire view, and then we've successfully created a barcode. Joking aside, this is actually just an individual mark for every single sales transaction. You can see some happened at $2.70 and 60 cents, some at $3.01 and 10 cents. We have an individual mark for all of those. This is not the best way to visualize the distribution of individual sales. And so a lot of times people will come in, right-click on sales, create bins. This will be the sales bin, and then we'll say we want to bin it by units of 10. So when you right-click there, create it up here, we now have a sales bin. If we drag that up to columns, and then we right-click, drag that up, do a count for the number of records, we now have our histogram of the distribution of individual sales transactions. You'll also notice that we have domain padding going on. So if we come up here to our sales bin, right-click and get rid of the missing values, we have a nice, smooth histogram of sorts with no gaps. So I'm not really sure what this distribution is called. I think random would be a good word. But you'll notice we don't have any gaps in our data. The only thing that really stands out is this one sales transaction worth 430. This one sales bin worth 430, sorry. But then if you come up here and you show missing values, you'll notice that we actually don't have any transactions that are between 140 and 149. Same up here with 260. Same up here with 690. The thing is, there is some missing data here, but our bin function can comprehend it and show the missing values. It's because if you come into your bin right here, click on Edit, you'll see it has a minimum value and a maximum value. So the bin is something that's called range aware. When a function, or in this case the binning calculation, is range aware, it makes it possible for Tableau to understand that there are individual values in between these minimum and maximum, even if they don't exist in the data. This is a very important point. You'll notice that what's happening here is range aware because Tableau recognizes that across the 12 months in a year, it recognizes there is January, February, March, even if March doesn't exist in your data. So we have range aware calculations in terms of date parts, but also in terms of bins. So that is domain padding. Domain padding is really just taking advantage of those range aware functions inside of Tableau to pad your data and create blank values or placeholders in your view that Tableau can then access in order to pad your data and make it so that you represent the full spectrum of values available. Data densification is the process of using table calculations on top of that to comprehend those blank values and placeholders in your view to make it possible to draw these marks even when you don't have data. The easiest way to show this is back with our date parts. I'll remove quarter to make it a little bit less cluttered, and then we'll come up and take a sum of sales, duplicate that so we now have our chart repeated. But again, you'll notice on both charts we have values for January, we have values for February, we don't have anything for March. However, if we come up to our sum of sales, add a quick table calculation, and then do a running total, you'll see something awesome has happened. Look at January. Again, the marks as we would expect. Look at February, the marks as well. However, if you look in March, we now have a value. This is an incredibly important point. Look at the tooltip. You'll see we have month of date for March, year of date for 2013, our table calculation, which is the running sum of sales along table across, that's showing the 34,000 we have in sales, but our sales value is blank, indicating a null in the data. That's because for March 2013, our data doesn't actually show anything. This is the process of data densification. You run a table calculation across a padded range, and Tableau then, in essence, makes up data to fill in that placeholder. It draws a mark for you without actually increasing the size of your data set. So this is something that's all handled inside of Tableau's engine, where it does the data densification across your padded values. Now why? Why is this important? Let's look at an example. So I mentioned I have this example set up. What we'll do a lot of times when creating advanced charts is we'll want to draw marks that don't exist in our data. Just like in here where we showed March, a lot of times when we're drawing custom charts, it involves drawing a line or some other figure across marks that don't exist in our data. So what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll create a field called toPad. This is just two values, 1 and 10, that basically make up the minimum and maximum of our range. Then we'll create a bin off of that. So this is our bins on toPad. Generally I call them padded. And then you make your size of bin 1. So you'll see again the minimum value of 1, the maximum value of 10, but these bins understand that there are other values in between those two because bins are range aware. So now if I switch out to pad for padded, you'll see nothing. It's because right here, missing values aren't showing. Then if we show missing values, you have the values 1 all the way through 10, rather than just 1 and 10 like existed in our data. If we run sales across this, or really any calculation, we can just do number of records instead, that's fine. You'll see we have values in 1 and values in 10. Don't worry about the distribution of these two, this is just an example. I'll explain more on that later. But then if we run a table calculation across this, you now see that Tableau is drawing those marks. The cool thing about this is that when we start drawing values, you'll notice that now we have 2 points that exist in our data, but now we have a line that Tableau can draw between them. This is incredibly important functionality that makes it possible to go in and to draw really cool shapes that Tableau doesn't include by default by plugging in mathematical equations that make it possible to shape how this line moves and draw some really cool curves. So that's it for this lecture. That is what domain padding is, along with data densification. Hope you understood that. Feel free to review it. It's a very important concept, and I owe a lot of credit to people like Alan Eldridge, Jonathan Drummey, Joe Mako, who have done a lot of work online to explain these things. Feel free to look them up. Feel free to walk through this lecture again, and then we'll see you on the next lecture to tell you how to make this 2-pad and really explain our data prep process. Thanks.